The real reason why Iran is in the elite crosshair, there's something called the North-South Corridor. Now, what is that? It's the International North-South Transport Corridor. It's a multi-modal network of over 7,000 kilometers. That's about what? 5,000 miles of sea and rail and land routes for the transport of goods between India and Iran, Azerbaijan, Russia, Central Asia, and Europe. And it's a project of the utmost importance for the future of Iran, perhaps even more important than China's Silk Road to the Chinese. Because for the Iran, the South-North corridor is a lifeline. So if you kind of look at the bigger picture, what's happening in the Middle East, because the mainstream media and a lot of the pundits would like to focus, narrowly focus, as if it was a wrestling match, the good and the bad, the dialectic. So for Israel as a state, the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh is meaningless and unprofitable, because Haniyeh was a political leader of Hamas recognized by Israel. And negotiations were held with him on the exchange of hostages, ceasefire with Hezbollah. So if Israel is not behind the assassination, then who is? The assassination benefits Netanyahu in order to keep his position as prime minister of the country. That's on the one hand. There's another thing, Alex. Iran is selling heavy water to the United States. A lot of people don't know this. United States media is not telling you about this, possibly through third countries. Now, heavy water contains deuterium atoms that is used in what? In nuclear reactors. And so the United States has begun negotiations to buy enriched uranium from Iran as one of the conditions for returning to the nuclear agreement with Iran from which Trump withdrew. And these negotiations on uranium, needless to say, were also interrupted by the assassinations of Haniyeh.
While other networks lie to you about what's happening now, InfoWars tells you the truth about what's happening next. Visit Infowars.com/show and share the link today.
All right, more than 2 weeks ago, Roger Stone predicted who they would be picking as the VP. He is absolutely horrible, evil globalist. He'll be joining us in 30 minutes. But right now, Daniel Estulin, who I've known since like 2006 or so, is a best-selling author, great researcher, amazing person that has contacts everywhere, just dead on. And I wanted to get him on to talk about the different geopolitical developments that are accelerating, future attempts on Trump, Hamas, Israel, Iran, Russia, Venezuela, the huge stock market correction that just happened, everything that's unfolding. As Lenin said, there are decades when nothing happens. There are weeks when decades happen. We are in a superstorm of all these converging accelerations of technology and of population and culture. I cannot stress to everybody how extremely dangerous the times are, but there's also a lot of good things happening as well. So Daniel Estulin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll put your websites up on screen, Estulin Media, Estulin.media, and Estulin VZ, or any other sites. You've got a lot of sites, whichever ones you want up. But where should we start right now with all the craziness in our world?
I think Israel and Iran is a pretty good point. I mean, Israel is not crazy now. People say to you, so what do you think? We're going to go into a third world war? There's some kind of a celebration. Are you people insane? Do you understand what the third world war might entail? It might entail a thermonuclear war, which means that 4 or 5 billion people will be eliminated immediately, which is, of course, the elite would like that, because you have a $4 quadrillion debt, Alex. You need to somehow write it off. They keep calling aliens to come down and see us. They're not there. So they need to, some kind of a force majeure to be able to write off debts and responsibility. And if you actually kill 3, 4, 5 billion people as a result of a thermonuclear war, get people, big war, not little tiny little piddly little war.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to end the giant Ponzi scheme that's coming to an end. So as horrible as it sounds, they admittedly want a great reset.
They want a great reset and a great reset and a great thermonuclear war. Again, they've been trying. They're pushing Israel-Palestine. They're pushing Russia, Ukraine. They're pushing things in South America. Africa is coming to the fore. You have Taiwan and China. But people just don't want a big thermonuclear war. Now, my question is Israel crazy enough to go to war with Iran? Israel doesn't have the military technical potential to even think about an armed conflict with Iran. I know there's a lot of crazy kooks in Israel who want war.
No, they intend to suck us in.
Well, Israel's population is 9 million people. 25% of that, they're Arabs, and for the most part, they hate Israel. against Iran's 80 million population. They don't have the bodies to go to war. But again, this is the kind of war that Netanyahu needs. Israel as a nation state doesn't need it. Netanyahu needs this war to stay out of prison. Now, Alex, about 12 or 15 years ago, I can't exactly remember, there's a report, out of Pentagon on how to turn Iran into a subservient lapdog of the West. And one of the key conclusions of the report, in order to take over Iran, a strong, well-equipped, and very large ground military contingent is required. Also, the bottom line is that the carpet bombing, as they said, the conclusions they reached in that report, okay, will help, but it's not going to have much of an effect. Why not? There are many reasons, but one of the most important reasons is that Iran has wasted no time since the 1979 revolution. It has built up many underground military bases. And so the conclusion of the Pentagon report back 15 years ago, they postponed the attack on Iran indefinitely. And every time the United States or Israel threatens regime change or some color revolution, the Iranians whisper in their ear, try it, and we'll block the Hormuz Straits. In other words, Iran will be willing to block 60% of world's oil trade coming through the Straits.
And let me just stop you. I have a family member that he's a retired military officer. He was the adjunct to one of the top guys in the Middle East, top general. He didn't tell me he didn't classify, but he told me 15 years ago, and I've told it since then, separate from that report, he said, look, we war gamed Iran. They already had nukes back then, folks. He said, we go to war with them, it shuts down the world economy. We can't do it. The liberals aren't good. Biden and Obama aren't good. They just know they can't win it. Then you've got crazy neocons think they can. Explain that to people.
Well, Iran in the last 15 years has improved tenfold the production of their own weapons. And we're seeing it in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Russia, 60 years ago, we went into space first. Today, we're buying drones from the Iranian mullahs. Iran's mobilization resource is about 2 million people. That's their standing army, Alex, in a drop of a hat. And the people of Iran, they're patriotic, although they're very critical of their leadership. And like the French or the Americans or the Europeans, Iranians, despite cheap Western propaganda, have the right to participate in protest rallies without asking permission from the government and local authorities. And then, if push comes to shove, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah al-Khamenei, he steps in and becomes the arbiter between the people and the government. And if the people are right and the government is wrong, the supreme leader can tell the government they're wrong and they should reconsider the action. And by the way, speaking of intelligence, Iranian intelligence is considered one of the best in the world. They're not better than the Russians, they're not better than the Americans, they're not better than the British or the Israelis, but they're one of the top in the world, top 5, top 6. And at the same time, it's now public knowledge that during the 8-year war between Iran and Iraq, 1980 to 1988, Israeli companies supplied military optics to the Iranian armed forces through third companies, such as the Arab Ben Menashi, for example. And there's another important reason. A lot of people don't really understand. They think it's some kind of a religious thing. There's a democracy. It's not about that at all. One of the most important reasons that nobody's talking about. I went online just before I joined your show. I wanted to see who's talking about this particular point. The real reason why Iran is in the elite crosshair, there's something called the North-South Corridor. Now, what is that? It's the international North-South transport corridor. It's a multi-modal network of over 7,000 kilometers. That's about, 5,000 miles of sea and rail and land routes for the transport of goods between India and Iran, Azerbaijan, Russia, Central Asia, and Europe. And it's a project of the utmost importance for the future of Iran, perhaps even more important than China's Silk Road to the Chinese. Because for Iran, the South-North corridor is a lifeline. Now let's talk about Iran and Israel. For the longest time, these two countries have been declaring, opposite one another and threatening each other in many different ways. Iran says there should be no such thing as a state of Israel. Now, mainstream media report this: Iran wishes death to Israel. They're not saying kill the Jews. Okay, I'm not an apologist for Iran, but they're not saying that. They've never said that. The government never said, let's kill the Jews, as too many people mistakenly believe. What they're saying is the state of Israel is a wrong name for the state. Again, if you I always quote Thomas's theorem. If people define situation as real, they're real in their consequences. And the Iranians have a very profound appreciation of historical memory, and like the Americans, who can barely, call their country history. We've only been around for 200 some years. We're talking about civilization which has been around for millennia.
4,000.
And so for Iran, the events today, a decade ago, a century ago, 2 centuries ago, 1,000 years ago, is equally relevant. These are the people of very long memories. And so the Iranian people are very awake, they're very active, they're very creative, they're very long tradition, and that they've adhered to all their lives. If you look, for example, at the writings of the Old Testament, which is reflected both in the Bible and the Holy Book of the Jews, the Tanakh, when Moses brought the Jews from the Egyptian captivity to the Holy Land, his brother Aaron spoke for him, since Moses, as we know, had a stutter. And this Aaron was kind of a strange cat. So what does the book of Exodus tell us? When the Hebrews came out of the slavery in Egypt led by Moses, they carried silver and gold that they had received from the Egyptians. And when Moses went up Mount Sinai to receive the 10 commandments, he left the Israelites alone for 40 days and 40 nights. And although they were freed from slavery in Egypt by the Almighty, and theoretically they knew about his precepts through Moses, they disobeyed. Remember the story of the golden calf. Now, when the people saw that Moses was delayed in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods and we'll go before us." As for this Moses who brought us up, from the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. And so Aaron told them, "Take off your gold earrings, etc., etc." And so then all the people took off their gold earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took the gold from their hands, and with an engraving tool, he fashioned into a molten calf. Okay? So after the conversation between the Lord and Moses, Moses went down the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. And the tablets were the work of God. Okay? Now, but that's not all. They also created 2 arks of the covenant. We're talking about an artifact believed to be the most sacred relic of the Israelites, which is described as a wooden chest covered in pure gold with an elaborately designed lid called the mercy seat. Now, according to the book of Exodus, the ark contained 2 stone tablets of the 10 commandments. And these arks of covenant are different. The ark which was in Jerusalem, where the supporters of Moses settled, is supported by the angels. And in the corners of the second ark, which was with the supporters of Aaron, who settled to the north in Israel, is supported by the bulls. And therefore, when they say that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, the Iranians say, "Are you crazy? This is impossible." Historically speaking and biblically. But again, Iran never said that Israel had no right to exist. They do not like the Jewish state, which has taken this name. By the way, when the question of how to name the state was discussed, one option was to call it Judea, but the party of Aaron wanted it became Israel.
Sure, so just like
Israel,
Jesus said, there's always a real thing and a counterfeit.
Yeah, exactly. So if you kind of look at the bigger picture, what's happening in the Middle East, because the mainstream media and a lot of the pundits would like to narrowly focus, as if it was a wrestling match, the good and the bad, the dialectic. So for Israel as a state, the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh is meaningless and unprofitable, because Haniyeh was a political leader of Hamas recognized by Israel. And negotiations were held with him on the exchange of hostages, ceasefire with Hezbollah. So if Israel is not behind the assassination, then who is? The assassination benefits Netanyahu in order to keep his position as prime minister of the country. That's on the one hand. There's another thing, Alex. Iran is selling heavy water to the United States. A lot of people don't know this. United States media is not telling you about this, possibly through third countries. Now, heavy water contains deuterium atoms and is used in what? In nuclear reactors. And so the United States has begun negotiations to buy enriched uranium from Iran as one of the conditions for returning to the nuclear agreement with Iran from which Trump withdrew. And these negotiations on uranium, needless to say, were also interrupted by the assassinations of Haniyeh. Now, if you look at a much bigger picture even than that, in the Middle East and beyond, as I said, we have a $4 quadrillion US debt. Okay.
I was about to try to tie that into the Iranian imminent strikes. What do you see coming from that? The Trump assassination updates, the stock market, the Ukraine collapse. I mean, it all is crazy.
You have to understand that, there's the visible players, Alex, and the invisible player. You know how this works. I mean, you're the guy that, covered and uncovered and brought to light, all the evil deeds of the Bohemian Grove. You know how this works. So the visible players, Hamas, Iran, Israel. But if you kind of look at the invisible players, who's behind these players? It's very difficult to believe that Hamas is an independent player. So if Hamas is not an independent player, who is behind Hamas?
Well, Israel founded it. Israel founded it.
Exactly. So unleashing this maximum tensions in the Middle East requires launching Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, massacres of Israeli Jews, Jews massacring the Arabs, the Israeli settlers' actions against the Palestinians, Palestinians against the Israeli settlers to prepare the climate. And all sides are controlled from London as all covertly work together on the ground. For example, if you're talking about Hamas, we're talking about the Islamic resistance movement. Hamas, which includes both the military and the political wing, was formed in the Israeli-occupied territories back in 1987 as a kind of an outgrowth of a Palestinian branch of Muslim Brotherhood. And it's an outgrowth of the networks of the British General John Bagot Globe, the decades-long head of the Jordan-based Arab Legion, who fielded insurgent Islamic political groups throughout the Middle East under the pretext of fighting communist infiltration in the region. And so Gluck Pasha is also the godfather of the Islamic Jihad, whereas the British cold thinkers operating out of the Shiite city of Nafiev, Iraq, spawned the Hezbollah. And so from its inception, Alex, Hamas's military and terrorist actions against the Israeli military, civilian population primarily served one objective: to undermine Yasser Arafat and Palestine Liberation Organization's civil resistance campaign against the Israeli occupation, the Intifada, the resistance movement, which contribute to the establishing the conditions leading sane Israelis to realize that peace with the Palestinians was a strategic necessity for Israel. And so Oslo Accord was the result. And so the Hamas's headquarters outside the Middle East, right now it's in Qatar. Where is it located? It's located in London, which also serves as headquarters of its most overtly agent provocateur wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam. And this Izz ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, they conduct anti-Israeli attacks, including suicide bombings. But this isn't now. This is going back like 30 years ago.
No, you've done a great historical analysis, and come back for a full hour later this week or next week if we can. But the time we have, then we know your history. People don't know it. It's important to know history, kind of like Putin gave a lecture to Tucker Carlson. But what do you think is going to happen now with these different factions?
Well, it's a good question, because, again, one of the things we need to analyze, Alex, is actually who is representing what interests. We know that London represents Hamas, and behind the Israelis, you have the United States. Okay, now you have Kamala Harris, and now you have Donald Trump. What does Kamala Harris represent that Joe Biden didn't? Who is he with? What do these people want? And again, you have to put it in a greater context. How do you turn this little conflict into a bigger conflict, which is what the elite want? And the idea is there are some people, sane people, okay, in the United States government, both Republicans and Democrats, they don't want this war to expand because they don't know if they can control it. Because when it goes beyond a certain point of no return, okay, we are staring, face into a thermonuclear conflict. But again, the elite have a problem. It's a $4 quadrillion debt. You need to eliminate that debt. You have a lot of interests behind the players, behind the Hamas, behind the Hezbollah. Iran doesn't want a war. Israel doesn't want a war. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, he absolutely wants the conflict. Because the idea is if that the war stops, okay, we'll go back to the way things were before October 7th. He's going to go to prison. And there's a lot of people.
And there'll
be
an investigation of October 7th.
There'll be an investigation of October 7th. That's going to obviously, touch certain interests in the United States. And all this stuff with, like we're looking at 3 months before the elections. And Iran said they reserve the right to attack whenever they want. And Trump said it was going to be yesterday, I think, or today. I see the attack as end of August, beginning of September, when the presidential campaign really gets going, because the United States does not want any hostilities. And in fact, the latest I'm hearing, from my sources, is that the United States government, through the extra-official sources, they're telling the Iranian leadership, if you don't attack, we're going to unfreeze all your money. Okay, they can't afford a thermonuclear war because you cannot control it. There's just too many, elements which you cannot control.
And so it all goes down to Netanyahu is in trouble, and the whole world's on the brink because he wants to stay in power.
I think Netanyahu needs to be eliminated one way or another. There's people in Israel, especially in the military. The Israeli military do not want Netanyahu as the leader. They want him out because they understand the consequences. Netanyahu's son, by the way, is in Miami. partying, showing off his money, his gold watches, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't really understand. You have Netanyahu's son is in Miami showing off his, $50,000 Rolex watch. Fidel Castro's grandson is this enormous, $10 million yacht showing off, a $200,000 bottle of champagne. Why do these people do this? There's a good saying in Switzerland, money likes silence.
Yeah.
People who are really, really wealthy, they never show their wealth. It doesn't mean that they drive a Peugeot. You could drive a Mercedes-Benz, but it doesn't mean you have to drive a $5 million car. And that's what these people who have never had money, that's what they do, because they're thieves. We could say the same thing about Maduro. We could say the same thing about, Netanyahu's son, some of the oligarchs from Russia. It doesn't matter. It's a global phenomenon. But the situation is that the army does not like Netanyahu. They want him out. Is there going to be a coup d'etat in Israel? I don't know. I don't discard that. Okay, if push comes to shove, the army may take the necessary step to get rid of him because he's a danger to world peace.
Well, absolutely, and so, what about another attempt on Trump? I mean, they failed once, and
absolutely, I see it coming. The problem with Donald Trump for the global elite, he represents an alternative global project. Okay, if the objective, Alex, after the post-crisis, is for the winners to sit down at the table in a kind of a Yalta 2.0. Yeah, the Yalta 1.0 after World War II were the winning sides. Soviet Union, England, and who else was there? And Russia. No, Soviet Union, England, who else? And the United States. They sat down in Yalta, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin, and they discussed what the post-World War II world is going to look like. You're going to need to do the same thing right now. So who's going to sit at this table? You're going to have Putin representing Russia. You're going to have Xi Jinping representing China. You're going to have Modi representing India. And you're going to have someone representing the United States. Who is that going to be? Okay, because neither Trump or doesn't matter if it's Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever, they don't represent the United States in the sense that they represent a small sliver of the United States because the United States as a nation state is terribly divided. So how do you unite a country? You can't. And so whoever wins this conflict right now, battle royal, okay, and Kamala Harris cannot win, and the polls numbers are allegedly it's all nonsense. You know that. I mean, she's a cackler. She can't talk. You heard her talk, and she's just shit for brains. You can't have that person as the president of the United States. I don't care what the deep state.
No, I totally agree. So they're in a rock and hard place. Let me ask you this: you always know everything I bring up. Did you see Jamie Raskin? I know he's one of the top leftist planners, dad famous communist, saying we're going to have a civil war. We're going to overthrow the Supreme Court. And we're going to remove Trump, whether he likes it or not, and we're going to all have paramilitary forces. Now, this guy couldn't find his ass with both hands, but he is one of the top deciders in the leftist Obama cabal. What do you make about a statement? Is that meant to make his people feel powerful, to have confidence?
It's a very good observation, Alex. Again, he's not a player. Just you can talk about Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab says all kinds of things. And people listen to him, presidents, prime ministers, but why do they listen to him? Because he's important? No, he's not important. He's a clown. They listen to him because he is the voice of the real power behind the throne. That's why they listen. That's why they pay attention to him. That's why they receive him. That's why they read attentively what he writes. Doesn't even matter if he writes or if he doesn't. He's the voice of the elite.
Exactly. So he's the mouthpiece. So what does his statement mean?
It means that there's going to be a civil war in America, something we've been talking about for over 10 years. Okay?
You said it 2 weeks ago, and now he's saying.
I said it 10 years ago, Alec. I said it 10 years ago.
No, but I know you did on the show. I agree. You said it when I made Endgame with you 17 years ago, you did. We know that. I'm saying 2 weeks ago, you said that. Now he's saying it. What does that mean?
Well, it means that you're going to have a civil war. And the problem is that the United States as a country, we talked about this as well, like you and I have a life cycle. Maybe we'll live 80 years, maybe 90, maybe 100, but every country in the world has its own cycle. And the United States as a country lives on an 80-year cycle, give or take 2 or 3 years. And if you kind of look at it, so for the people understand it, kind of a linear progression. If you go back, not to the, to the Mayflower, a little bit after that, if you go to the end of the 1600s and you start adding 80 years, the first 80-year period takes you to 1776. That's the revolution. The second 80-year period takes you to 1860. That's the Civil War. The next 80-year period takes you to 1940. That's the Second World War. The last 80-year period takes you to 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. We're talking about COVID. We're talking about Great Reset, everything else. So the United States historically, as a country has been able to come out of these crises via some kind of an armed conflict or revolution or civil war, Second World War, or this, which in many ways is worse than any of these other conflicts. And so right now the United States is a kind of a fork in the road. What do? You go third world thermonuclear war, or you go civil war 2.0. And these are the choices they have to make. And so the elite right now behind the scenes, they're trying out different scenarios.
Well, but I would choose civil war. I would choose civil war over nuclear war, obviously.
Well, again, unfortunately, you and I are sane individuals. We prefer none of the conflicts and solve things differently.
For neither.
But the thing is that it's absolutely, and there's a reason why you have, Hollywood Mouthpiece showing you the film Civil War. I mean, it's absolutely certain. The country is so divided on itself that there's no other way to solve these differences. And had Trump, you and I talked about this before, had Trump, when the elections were stolen from him in 2020, had Trump said, with the American flag in hand, to the barricades, let's go for these people, the United States, by the end of 2021, would have been coming out, the tail end of that civil war, still the number one nation in the world, economically, financially, politically, technologically, et cetera. But Trump chickened out. And as a consequence, right now, the United States is far worse off than it was 4 years ago. The situation is more complex than ever. Russia is stronger than ever. China and Russia are now, big as buddies. And so the United States is in a very difficult situation.
No, you're right. Stay there, Daniel. Daniel Estulin, stay there. People find you at Estulin.media. Do 5 more minutes with us. And Roger Stone's got big breaking news. I talk to Daniel Estulin all day. Yeah, we don't want civil war or nuclear war, but I would take civil war over nuclear war every day. We'll be right back. Well, I hope listeners here listening to us at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time understand this is not a Netflix show. This is not a movie. It's not a James Bond flick. This is the real world, and you live on it. And Daniel Estlin's a best-selling author, great researcher, expert on this, and he's dead on. Raskin, who is a minion of the globalists, but a high-level functionary, says we're having a civil war. And they're going to make it racial, just like they're trying in England right now. So in the time we have left, what is the crash landing? What is the best-case scenario of a lot of bad scenarios here? And what are you hoping happens versus what you think is going to happen, Daniel?
Well, first of all, Trump has to win. Okay, there's no. If Trump loses, then America is going to have a really, really hard time. Okay, America is right now, the United States right now is like.
So this was likely posted at the beginning of 2024. I'm going to assume. Anyway.
Comparison-wise, it's like the Soviet Union back in 1982 when Brezhnev was on his deathbed. Every time Brezhnev would come out, they'd pump him with pills. And he'd go, nobody would have a clue what he was saying. Well, Biden is the same. And then they brought up Chernenko and Andropov. All these people died over the next couple of years. And then Gorbachev appeared, and the rest is obvious. The Soviet Union collapsed. And so the United States right now is a very difficult predicament. Okay, Trump, again, let's go back to the debate with Biden, whatever you want to call it, debate, quote unquote. Did Trump say anything relevant? No, he really didn't. Is that because Biden was totally out of it? Probably. But he really didn't propose anything, new.
Why is nobody?
There's no new ideas as to what he would do to the country. So I think the United States has a ideological problem right now. What are you as a country? Are you still a constitutional republic? Are you a democracy? What's your objective short term? I think the objective short term has to be you have to organize your own house. And so the United States is going to organize the United States from within. It means it doesn't have the money or the forces to do it, without. Which means that Venezuela, the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia. As Trump said, Xi Jinping is a killer. Not because he kills people, but he's just, a killer negotiator. Same could be said for Trump,
He said he's a fierce man.
He's a fierce man. Well, whatever you want to call it. And so the United States is in a very difficult predicament because the people they have running the country, okay, they have really no idea what to do. And so what you're seeing right now behind the scenes, again, we're talking about the global elite. In England, what are we seeing? We're seeing the white population being wiped out. Now, it's not a racist statement.
Everywhere.
What they're doing is also very obvious. These are the people, the natives, not the native Indians, but the natives, the white people of England. These people understand freedom of speech, democracy. They understand their rights. And so these people are being eliminated. They're being substituted by multiculturalism, which is a euphemism for control. And they want to do the same thing in Europe. That's being done by the Vatican. Who is running all these people from North Africa,
The Vatican.
Central Africa? It's the Vatican. They got, they've been doing this for 2,000 years. They got the ways and the means. And why are they doing this? Because Vatican is a very right-wing organization. They've been around for a long time. Europe today is pusillanimous, it's LGBT, it's all kinds of, degeneracies. So by bringing these people from Africa who are young, very, fiercely religious, angry, very right-wing, hungry, they don't have children, they don't have wives. And so they're flabbergasted and appalled by what they see in Europe. Men wearing skirts and, high heel shoes. And so they're destroying them. They're wiping them out. They're doing it in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, in Sweden. They're doing it, the entire European. We're seeing it right now in England.
US.
And so the idea is to destroy that LGBT culture, that pusillanimous, liberalism. And then the next step after that, the mask comes off. And you have the Fourth Reich, hardcore right-wing dictatorship, Alex. It's a mixture of Hitler and Stalin and Mao Zedong and Genghis Khan all in one.
I think you're dead on. Daniel, we got to go.
That's coming to Europe.
You're going to host with me for an hour next week and co-host the fourth hour. You already agreed. You picked the day.
Absolutely.
With the crew right now. I want to start over right where you began, or right where you ended just now, okay?
That was so cool. I've actually only ever heard of Daniel Estulin literally today. And it's wild to me that he is apparently the grandfather of Bilderberg, calling that out from the inside. And literally everything that he shared on Alex Jones just there. I didn't see the interview, so I was watching it with you, but are things that I've literally shared in videos as well over the years. And so it's anyways, it's a testament to good research, I think, when people can come to the same conclusions and there's credibility behind what he has said and what I have said, that it aligns. And so that was pretty cool for me. So again, if I would have saw his work earlier, that would have saved me a lot of time and energy doing the research myself. But would I have gotten to the point where I'm at now with my abilities? Probably not. And so that's why I don't like looking at other people's work or research when I'm looking at any type of event or situation. I want to come at it from my own perspectives and my own experiences first. And then after that, I will go from there. First with priority contacts and assets and things like that. Anyway. And I just wanted to share from Grok, not to make this too long. Or was it Gemini? Why is it not showing? But anyway, maybe I'll show this first. So this is what he's talking about. Really important right now. This is the North-South Transport Corridor. And standard route is in blue. Right here. Back to India. So Russia right now currently needs to go through all of these different areas in order to do any kind of trade. And what they want to do, and they've been trying for a long time, is go from Russia to Azerbaijan, Iran, and then India. And then again, these access routes will give them so much more maneuverability for transport routes that are not being impacted by Western influence, like these areas here, and Israeli influence, but more importantly, American and British. And so before I get into, okay, where is my Gemini? Okay, there we go. I'm actually preferring Gemini to Grok these days, but they're still, they're not 100%, not even close. Okay, so just so people have more of an understanding of, because it's very important, the International North-South Transport Corridor is arguably the most critical piece of hard infrastructure in the emerging multipolar world. From a geopolitical realist perspective, this is not just a trade route, it is a sanctions evasion's superhighway. It effectively allows Russia and Iran to trade with the economic powerhouse of India and potentially Southeast Asia without touching Western-controlled waters or choke points like the Suez Canal, the Strait of Gibraltar, or the English Channel. Here is the strategy breakdown of why this corridor is the physical backbone of the anti-Western alliance structure. I've been analyzing it because again, it's not the first time I'm talking about this. But anyway, the route bypassing the Atlantic Ocean. The current international trade architect is dominated by the sea, which is dominated by the U.S. Navy and NATO. The INSTC is a 7,200 kilometer multi-mode network ship, rail, and road designed to stay entirely within the Eurasian heartland. The path. Goods move from Mumbai, India, by sea to Bandar Abbas, Iran, by rail north through Azerbaijan, into Russia, St. Petersburg, Moscow, and potentially onward to Northern Europe. The speed. It is 30% cheaper and 40% shorter than the traditional Suez Canal route. A shipment that takes 40 to 60 days via Suez Canal takes only 20 to 25 days via INSTC. And so just by means of like this being like less pollution and oil, et cetera, should be the reason why people should be supporting this internationally. Anyway, the missing link, the Rasht-Astara Railway. For years, the project was theoretical because of a missing 164-kilometer rail link in northern Iran between the cities of Rasht and Astara. The update, 2024-2025. The war in Ukraine forced Russia's hand. Desperate for southern trade routes, Putin signed a deal to finance this railway construction, roughly $1.6 billion. Do you think there would be such a push for that trade route through Ukraine if this was actually something that was approved? India wants it, China wants it, other people want this. The geopolitical Game of Thrones, and no, I don't trust China, by the way. I don't think Canada should be doing any interactions or dealing with China at this point. Certain organizations, because they are a threat to our national security, and they have been for decades. And so I do think that China is the biggest threat to Canada. I think I'm going to reiterate that the U.S. still needs to be our strongest ally. Russia's lifeline. With European markets closed, Russia must pivot south. This corridor is their only viable path to the Indian Ocean warm water ports they have coveted since the days of Peter the Great. India's balancing act. India is the interesting variable. They are part of the Quad with the U.S., but they are heavily invested in this. They're heavily investing in this corridor. Why? Because it gives them access to Central Asian markets, bypassing their enemy Pakistan, and cheap Russian energy. So this really would help India. Anyway, Iran is the hub. This restores Iran to its historical position as the crossroads of the world. It makes them indispensable to both Moscow and New Delhi, effectively making them immune to total isolation by the West. The West has done enough to Iran. Oh my God. The countermove, the Zangezur corridor. To understand the friction, you must look at the Zangezur corridor, the rival. This is proposed NATO-Turkish-Azerbaijani route and would run parallel to the INSTC, but bypass Iran. Oh, NATO. The threat. Iran, you're literally doing the Bilderberg's biddings and WEF. Like, thank you. Anyway. Because it would cut off their direct link to Russia and Armenia. This is why you see tensions flaring between Iran and Azerbaijan. It is a war over which trade route will define the 21st century. Summary, the INSTC is the physical manifestation of the parallel economy. If the West controls the sea, SWIFT, shipping insurance, Suez, the Eurasian powers are building a land fortress. INSTC, BRICS currency that simply operates outside that jurisdiction. Why don't you just let people be, like, leave them alone? Anyways, I do think that benefits humanity, and it would ease a lot of tensions internationally if these were things that were put in place finally without any chicanery from NATO and the Five Eyes community, unfortunately. Anyways, but again, on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.